Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Coming up on today's episode, we preview an in-state matchup as number 25 and 6-0 Liberty travels to Lane Stadium to play the 4-2 Virginia Tech Hokies. How much of a threat does Liberty pose to Virginia Tech? We answer that question and more coming up on episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. It all gets started right now. So great to have you with us here on episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, we are so glad you could join us today as we record on Thursday afternoon, November the 5th. We've got our managing editor, Chris Coleman, with us, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land. He really is, folks. He is Malcolm Stewart behind the scenes, and I am your podcast host, Evan Hughes. A reminder, if you're watching live on YouTube, be sure to drop a question into the chat, and we will get to those at the end of the show. If you have a question for Will or Chris, any topic, any sport, we will get to them at the end of the show. This week and every week, the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. The Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, and to date, the firm has defended tens of thousands of people charged with moving violations. For a free consultation, you can call anytime, day or evening, toll-free. The number is 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031, or email the Fisher Law Firm at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you. How are you doing?
I'm enjoying the weather, man. It's perfect. It's going to be like 70 for the next week. Be a great Saturday for a tailgate.
Great tailgating weather.
Great November tailgating weather, too, man. It's amazing. Now, watch next year. We'll be having blizzards at this time.
It's tragic.
Year. Malcolm, are they still like not allowing like students to tailgate in your area? So the cops roll through there and make sure nobody's outside partying. So they just make you go back inside and party in closer quarters. No comment.
No comment here either.
You know, I think that is one thing about this year, actually. If you look at the weather we've had on just about every game day, home or away, it's been beautiful.
I know.
Just like the game that was supposed to be a Thursday night game against Boston College, it was like low 70s, mid 70s that day. So
it's like, what is it, November 5th, and I still walked to the gym this morning at like 7:15. You know, I'm not supposed to be able to do that this time of year.
Yeah, I got in my vehicle this morning. It was kind of, well, not this morning, like 10:30, 11 o'clock, and the sun was already beating in on it. It was already warm.
Well, we have a great show planned for you today, episode 148. Do want to remind you, next Thursday, we celebrate episode 150.
Previewing the Miami game,
Miami game. So kind of fitting for a big episode, big number, to be a big game as well, previewing Virginia Tech in Miami. But we've got a great show planned for you today. Episode 148 of the, episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Yep. We are going to preview number 25, Liberty, coming to Virginia Tech. How much of a threat does Liberty pose to Virginia Tech, even though they're 14.5-point underdogs? But they're ranked 25th in the AP poll. We're going to talk about their high-powered offense. We're going to talk about their defense. We're going to get game predictions for Will and Chris. But we begin the Tech Sideline Podcast with some sad news. And legendary Virginia Tech baseball coach Chuck Hartman, who led the Hokies from 1979 to 2006, won nearly 1,000 games in 28 seasons at the helm of the Hokies, passed away on Monday. Chris, what kind of impact does Chuck Hartman leave behind at Virginia Tech?
You know, when you can stay employed at the same place for so long.
For a long time.
That means you're really good at your job, especially in the world of college sports where it's fairly easy to get fired, right? He was really, really good at his job. He was a constant in the community. Like up till even this past season, I still saw him at every basketball game.
Yeah, that's right.
He'd park right there in lot 1 and walk in like a regular fan. So he was a Tech guy right up until the very end. I remember going to his last game. Like he already announced his retirement. I think they were playing Charlotte, and Tech didn't have much talent at that point, and Charlotte was winning the game. But at one point, a Tech player was trying to take third base and got called out, and I thought he was safe. Now, I'm biased, of course, but Hartman came out to argue it, and it was almost like he was trying to get thrown out of his last game. And I'm pretty sure that there's no way that umpire would have ejected him from his last game. Just no way that was going to happen, right? But it was pretty funny to observe. But yeah, he's a legend, man.
So I was 1983 through 1987, and the year before I got there, and if there are people watching, in case I get this wrong, they can correct me. In 1982, Virginia Tech went 50-9 and did not get an NCAA invitation.
Yeah, if you think Tech men's basketball program used to get screwed under Greenberg, then you hadn't seen anything.
And I think there was another year where they went like 48-11 or something like that, maybe in the year before or the year after. But I remember reading about that in the CT when I was a freshman, sitting there in the dining hall one day, reading that. So, Evan, do you have in front of you what years he was the head coach at Tech?
Correct, 1979 to 2006. He'd come from High Point, where he had a very successful career there, and won over 1,400 games in his career, nearly 1,000 at Virginia Tech.
I think he's in the High Point Hall of Fame. He's in the Virginia Tech Hall of Fame. I believe he's in the NCAA Baseball Hall of Fame. I think I read.
State of Virginia Hall of Fame. He's in a lot of.
He's in the American Baseball Coaches Association Hall of Fame. Was inducted in 2004.
Yeah. So, younger Virginia Tech fans may not know this, but the baseball field used to be where the Virginia Tech football practice field and indoor facility are now. So picture that as a baseball field. Home plate was back in the corner near the west stands, the current west stands of Lane Stadium, and so the fence was out there on the hill.
So left field is the Jamerson Center, basically.
Yes,
yeah.
And I'll tell you a story about that in a second. Well, these are not Chuck Hartman stories though, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But fans of my era. You'd go out and you'd sit on the hill out in right field, and you could watch the game. And we used to take coolers out there, and man, it used to be a blast out there. And I think they tried to replicate that a little bit when they built the new stadium, but it doesn't get used that way. I think there's a video board stuck out there now. But I would see now Chuck Hartman didn't know me. I never interviewed him or anything like that. But I would see him at basketball games, and I'd talk to him about that sweet orange jacket he had. Man, he had a killer. Big, what would you call that? A baseball jacket, Chris?
It's just an athletic jacket. I don't think there's a particular.
I can see an old school manager wearing that.
So Chris,
absolutely.
So Chris had a conversation with Brad Klontz via text message the other day about those jackets. So.
Yeah, and it was like I think every Tech athlete got them back then. It had their first name on the front and their last name on the back or something like that. And Chuck got himself one too during all that and just kept it. So Chuck's been wearing that, or was wearing that jacket for like 30 years.
Yeah, very nice.
Well, Hartman, all-time winningest coach in Virginia Tech history in any sport. He won 961 games in 28 seasons at Virginia Tech. And Jimmy Robertson wrote a really nice article on HokieSports.com about the legacy that Chuck Hartman leaves behind. And I'll finish off this topic with a paragraph that he wrote.
I do want to say one more thing before you get into that. I think something that's underappreciated about Chuck Hartman was when Virginia Tech it was bad enough being a baseball coach in the Big East, but when because it's more of a Northern Conference, it's difficult the Metro was very Southern, so I think that's when Chuck had a lot of his success. They got moved to the Big East, and it was more Northern, and then after that they got into the Atlantic 10. Virginia Tech spent
4 years.
No, it's like 7 years in the Atlantic. No, you're right. 4. It was like basically 95 through 2000, roughly.
It was like 4 in the A10, 4 in the A10, 4 in the Big East.
Yeah. But when Virginia Tech transitioned to got kicked out of the Metro, and I think I said something about getting kicked out of the Big East. That's wrong. They were in the Big East for football, Metro for all sports, got kicked out of the Metro and had to transition all sports to the Atlantic 10. So Chuck had to coach in the Atlantic 10 for 4 years. And I think at first they won a conference title or two because they still had more talent than your typical A10 team. But that was Chuck took one on the chin for the betterment of the whole athletic department.
No doubt about that.
Not a great conference to be a baseball coach in.
Well, he coached in many conferences, and when he retired, Virginia Tech was just beginning their time in the ACC. But back to what Jimmy Robertson wrote. Again, it's on Hokiesports.com, and I really encourage everyone to read it. I just want to read a couple of sentences that he wrote, and he said, quote, "They also contributed financially to Virginia Tech student athletes, giving more than $100,000 in support of the Hokies over the years. Others may have given more money, but no one cared more," close quote. So what a legacy Chuck Hartman leaves behind, and our thoughts and condolences are with the Hartman family, and thought it was fitting to lead off today's podcast talking about the legacy of Chuck Hartman. Let's transition now to what we're going to spend the majority of the show talking about, and that is Virginia Tech hosting number 25 Liberty this weekend inside of Lane Stadium. We're going to spend a lot of time previewing this game. Chris has his article up on techsideline.com. We're going to look at the numbers. We'll look at the offensive Liberty, the defensive Liberty. We'll get to the predictions, but I want to spend a couple of minutes not looking at this individual Liberty team. I want to focus on Liberty right now and the transition they've made since 2017, going from an FCS level program up to an FBS program. It's well documented how much money Liberty University has, the resources they have, the facilities they have. They're new to FBS, but they're 6-0. They're ranked 25th right now. Will, do you see a scenario in which Liberty could one day potentially become a Power 5 school, or could potentially ever get to the point where they challenge Virginia Tech in recruiting and become a big-time program given the resources and money that Liberty University has?
Well, they certainly have a tremendous amount of money, and that's at least half the battle. You can build good facilities, which they've done. You can hire good coaches if you've got money. You can have a big, fat recruiting budget. The thing that I don't know, and I'm sure there are people out there listening that know a lot more about Liberty University than I do, I think they have certain standards of on-campus conduct that the kids have to live up to that go there. Mm-hmm. And they are the kind of things that your typical college student is not interested in abiding by.
I think I got a letter from their football team one time when I was in high school, and it listed all the things that you could and couldn't do. And
couldn't be in a girl's dorm room.
You couldn't hold hands with your girlfriend or something like that. I just remember the list of can do was about that long. The list of can't do was about that long.
Right. So there are certain standards of conduct that they ask their student body to abide by that could be a recruiting issue. Certainly, you can negatively recruit them. And there's a pool of players out there that will actually appeal to. I imagine that pool is pretty small. So I think that's something that's going to work against them in recruiting. And when you ask how good can they be, it's all about what kind of players can you get, right? You can have good facilities, get good coaches, and can you get good players also? So that's all this murky soup that the money part of the equation will get them to a certain level, but then what? As far as being a Power 5 school someday, probably not. That's a really tough club to crack into.
Yeah, I mean, I think the days of big conference expansion is pretty much gone. If anything, I think the bigger conferences would downsize and try to keep more of the money amongst a smaller group of schools. I would actually be more worried about Virginia Tech getting left out, and then they were on the same level as Liberty because of that, than I would be of Liberty moving up. I don't see why the Power 5 schools would want to add more schools at this point. I don't see how it would break them any more revenue, and it's just more people to split the pot with.
So if we can go on a little bit of a tangent, when I interviewed Whit Babcock recently, and this is no secret, this had been talked about. He talked about how amongst some of his bigger donors, he had raised $12.5 million over the next 5 years that will be applied to the football program. And the school, whatever that means, is going to match that 12.5. So it's going to be $25 million over the next 5 years once this becomes official to support the football program. And from what I understand, the pitch to donate that was made to these high-end donors was, these are the things we have to do to not get left behind. There may be another round of not expansion, but contraction coming up at some point. And you don't want to be one of the small money schools and one of the schools that looks like they're not applying resources to the football.
It's why Virginia Tech did not get into the ACC in the 50s when it was formed. Because Virginia Tech started de-emphasizing athletics in the late 40s, right?
For a brief period of time, and happened to be the worst timing.
Right, and then the ACC formed, and they said, Virginia Tech's not interested in athletics, so we can't take them.
Yeah.
So right now, if something like that happened and they just looked at what the money Virginia Tech was spending in comparison to the other Power 5 schools, we would get left out. Most likely.
There's a possibility.
There's certainly a possibility
Yeah.
that the Hokies would get left out.
I want to transition, continuing this conversation about Liberty and its potential as a football program. On TechSideline.com, as I mentioned before, Chris has his game preview, which we're going to dive into in a minute, previewing Virginia Tech and Liberty. But under the final thoughts section of the article, I want to read this opening paragraph that you wrote, Chris. You said, quote, "Some professional baseball players make a career out of getting moved back and forth between AAA and the majors. They really aren't good enough to play in the majors, but they are probably too good for AAA too. Some people, myself included, refer to those types of guys as quadruple A players. There is no such level in baseball, but if there were, that's where those guys would be playing. Bull Durham's Crash Davis is the best fictional example I could think of," close quote. So when you think about Liberty's program, do you see them as a quadruple A program, one that's good enough and better than FCS level, but not good enough to really compete in the FBS?
They're good enough to compete in the FBS, but not really at the Power 5 level. I was particularly talking about this team. Like, I see an SEC head coach. I see a quarterback with SEC talent. I see a 325-pound nose guard, which is not common amongst schools
Smaller
that were just
yeah.
in the FCS a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, by the way, when Virginia Tech played them in 2016, Liberty was FCS.
Correct. Right.
It's been that recent.
So I see guys, I see lots of strengths. I'll look at parts of their team and see, oh yeah, they're FBS for sure. And then I look at other parts of it and like they've got a guard and let's see. Their starting center is 6'1", 295, and their starting left guard is 6'1", 290. That's extremely small for interior offensive linemen, both from a height standpoint and a weight standpoint in this modern era of football at the FBS level.
Yeah.
All their receivers, or most of their receivers, are like 165 pounds. Their defensive ends are 235. All their defensive backs are below 200, and 4 of their 5 are below 190. Their kicker can't kick the ball to the end zone and can barely make a kick over 30 yards.
Yeah,
so they've got a bunch of FBS pieces, and they've got a bunch of FCS pieces also.
So
like,
they're still transitioning.
They're still transitioning. They're going to have some impressive players on the field that, like, you'll look at Malik Willis and say, wow, what an athlete. And then they'll also put some other players out there that you will realize that they should not be playing against a Power 5 team. They're just not good enough. So they're somewhere in the middle. I think they're going to be impressive against certain competition, but when they face a major league curveball, that's when you see what they're actually able to handle, and they'll be facing Power 5 competition. They'll be facing that major league curveball for the first time this weekend.
All right, so before we transition into previewing the game and the offense, a reminder that Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by Campus Emporium. We have a new item on the podcast set today. Will, for our listeners who aren't watching, what are you holding in your hand right now?
All right, so let's get the mic back in here where you can hear me and give you the official name of what I'm holding up here. Give me a second.
There's a really cool looking item, by the way, which will be available for those watching on YouTube. We'll be sure to put it in the description so you can have the link to order.
This is a Virginia Tech Steel City travel tumbler.
Steel City.
Steel City. I guess that's the brand. Keep your drink warm during chilly fall games. Stainless steel travel mug with maroon acrylic band and orange VT logo. Holds approximately 16 ounces. And the maroon band around the middle is kind of translucent, sort of see-through, so it's got some depth to it. Very cool, and it's got a place where you can stick. It's got a lid where you can stick a straw and suck out of it and stuff like that.
Steel City sounds very blue collar.
It does.
You can get it and put it next to your lunch pail that you've got.
That's right.
Yeah.
So $18.99, and we will drop the link in the description, or if you're visiting the website, you can just see it as a featured item.
Chris, the Liberty Flames are unbeaten, have the 6th best rushing offense in the country. Their 6 opponents are a combined 4-28 on the season. How legit is Liberty, and how concerned should Virginia Tech be about the Flames on Saturday?
Yeah, all good questions. I think there's always a tendency when somebody has played a terrible schedule, as they have. Now, let's put it out there. I mean, those opponents they've beaten are a combined 4-28. They are terrible.
let's list them real quick. Western Kentucky's 2-5. They're half of those 4 wins.
Right.
FIU's 0-3. North Alabama's an FCS program at 0-2. Louisiana Monroe's 0-7. Syracuse 1-6. Probably arguably the worst team in the ACC. Southern Miss is 1-5. And they've all, so that's combined 4-28.
Mm-hmm. Right. So terrible competition. Now, that said, like I think there's a lot of people that come out there and say, oh, they're not any good because they haven't beaten anybody that's any good. Well, we don't know that. We don't know that they're good, and we don't know that they're bad. We don't know that they're underrated, or we don't know that they're overrated. Until they play somebody with a pulse, we won't know any of that. We'll have a much better idea of it after this weekend. You can't dismiss them just because of their schedule. Now, but you might be able to dismiss them after this weekend if Virginia Tech goes out there and stomps them.
Right.
Then yes, you'll be able to say, yeah, they were 6-0 because they played a bunch of horrible teams. But if they hang around and take Virginia Tech into the fourth quarter, then of course you won't be able to say that. So their schedule does make me question them to the extent of, like, I don't know how good they are. Like, I think Malik Willis is good. I know he's a good athlete, a really good athlete. How good of a quarterback is he? I don't know. He's
6'1", 215.
67.2% completion rate, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns, 1 interception. Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Hendon Hooker would have done at least that against the same competition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are some bad teams. So we'll
Chris,
find out more.
In the preview, Chris embedded highlight. It's like almost a 10-minute highlight package. It's really a condensed game version of Liberty's victory over Southern Miss, which 56-28 or something
56-35.
56-35.
Yeah,
So
it was not a boring game.
Right. So go watch that. And it's interesting because I don't remember the exact phrasing, and I don't want to scroll through my phone to look it up, but somebody asked after our preview, they asked the question of, well, how do you know they're any good? And I said, watch the highlight film. They make some plays. They've got some speed. It doesn't matter how good or bad Southern Miss is on defense. You watch the highlights of Liberty against Southern Miss, and you're going to go, wow, that was a nice play.
And we do know Malik Willis from his days at Auburn. They never trusted him to give him the keys to the quarterback position from a passing game perspective.
Right.
I think he threw like 14 passes in his 2 years there.
Yeah.
They let him run it a lot, particularly when he was a freshman. And I put it in my preview yesterday. I forget the numbers right now. But I think he averaged about 7 yards per carry when he was at Auburn.
Yeah, against SEC competition.
Right. So he is a good enough athlete. He was once committed to Virginia Tech as a cornerback, as an athlete cornerback type. And he had a great senior season in Georgia and decided he wanted to play a quarterback.
Auburn came calling, cha-ching.
And this was the year that Virginia Tech, I believe, signed Hendon Hooker to that 2017 recruiting class. So, yeah, that would have been the year Tech signed
Sounds
Hooker.
right, yeah.
And so we were like, well, we've already signed Hooker, and yeah, maybe we think you can play quarterback, but we would much rather you play defensive back. Like, if you're going to make the NFL, that's probably where it's going to be. Wanted to play quarterback, though. So he went to Auburn, got some playing time as a runner, but they would never let him pass it. He didn't want to do that anymore, so he found somebody who would let him play quarterback, and he found that at Liberty.
And that doesn't mean Virginia Tech was wrong. He's a good enough athlete that he might have developed into an NFL cornerback.
Right. I think he's one of those guys who wanted a certain college experience, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's one of those rare guys that doesn't care all that much about whether he plays in the NFL or not. And he just wants to enjoy. He just wants to play quarterback because he likes playing quarterback, and he'll take that as far as it gets him. And maybe a college degree is good enough for him, right? Maybe he's one of those types. I do think he has NFL athleticism. I'll say that. We'll find out. We'll have a much better idea how good of a quarterback he is this weekend. Now, and the other thing you can't evaluate him is because, to be fair, his wide receivers are quick, but they're like top 3 receivers are all like 165 to 180.
Yeah.
And so that makes it tough to evaluate him from that standpoint too.
Well, not only did Willis find someone who was willing to let him pass the ball at Liberty a little bit more, he found Hugh Freeze, who is in his second year as the coach of Liberty. For those that haven't really followed much outside of the ACC, that's the former head coach of Ole Miss, who had success at Ole Miss and then was ultimately let go.
He was a really good recruiter,
as most SEC coaches are.
And then Liberty brought him in last year. So I want to continue the conversation about Malik Willis. I want to throw a couple of numbers out about him right now. He's completing 67% of his passes. He's a 9-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, averaging 8.6 yards per attempt. Will, you watched the highlights of the Southern Miss game. You've looked at Chris's preview. You've done your research. Does Willis scare you more through the air or through the running game?
Through the running game. He looks bigger than 6'1", 215 to me. It's interesting. I'm just looking at the highlights. Not a lot bigger, but a little bigger. I expected since Virginia Tech had recruited him as a corner, I expected a guy who would be relatively small, that you'd look and say, yeah, he's one of those, not Demetrius Davis
level guys. He might be a
guys,
nickel
5'10",
type.
yeah.
I don't know. But yeah.
So he's good size, good acceleration, good speed. They run a lot of RPO. Hopefully, I think Brandon Patterson said that, or poster on our message board said about the same amount that North Carolina does. Which anytime North Carolina gets mentioned after the game this year, I get the heebie-jeebies. Again, what I watched was a highlight film, so you're going to see all the good plays. His throwing motion is very slightly odd. Arm is pretty strong. He completed some nice passes, both into coverage and, of course, guys that were running open outside coverage. But I would have to say my bigger worry is as a runner. I remember one of the highlight clips. I think Southern Miss blitzed or just had a good rush going. They had 3 guys descend upon him at the same time, and he got away from him in the pocket. If he breaks the pocket on you, he's going to pick up a lot of yardage.
Only one interception on the season as well, so that 9-to-1.
Yeah, he's done a good job protecting the ball.
But same question for you: running the ball or passing the ball? Where's he more effective, Chris?
I would say the goal is to stop their run.
Yeah.
They've run the ball 100 more times than they've thrown it this year. That includes scrambles and sacks, but they like to run it, and I'm guessing they're probably extremely similar to Virginia Tech in that their passing game completely operates off the success of their running game. He does not strike me as the type of quarterback that on 3rd and 8 is going to drop back and then pick you apart. Right. I think Virginia Tech and Liberty, different levels of football, but I think their strengths and weaknesses are probably fairly similar. Like if Virginia Tech keeps them in long yardage situations and shuts down their running game, I don't see Liberty dinking and donking down the field on the Hokies. Just like Virginia Tech wouldn't be able to do that to an ACC opponent if the Hokies' running game got shut down.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the most important thing this week, is to put them in a lot of 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9s, and then keep him in the pocket. His running this year is on designed runs, he's carried the ball 21 times for 253 yards. And on scrambles, he has 22 attempts for 293 yards. So he's very good at both.
Yeah.
21 of his 43 attempts have gone for 10-plus yards. So he's certainly a big play guy. So this is going to be the week to keep him in the pocket. He's forced 27 missed tackles this year. That's a lot. But it's a lot against bad teams, right?
Yeah.
But I still think he's a really, really, really good athlete. He'll have his biggest challenge this week, but I think this game is going to be more about his supporting cast.
I know there are a lot of listeners and viewers we have that really enjoyed when we get into the Pro Football Focus grades, and there is a poster on Tech Sideline. What's the name of this user?
AIS Hokey 05.
Thank you so much, AIS Hokey 05. He actually posted on the boards, and as Chris has in his article, some Pro Football Focus numbers, and he actually compares Malik Willis, Liberty's quarterback, to where he would rank in terms of ACC quarterbacks.
Right,
so there are a couple of numbers that I want to read. Willis would rank 6th in the ACC in Pro Football Focus grades among quarterbacks behind Sam Hartman. He would, let's see here, where was the other? When he does take off and run, he averages 5.4 seconds before running, which is higher than any
that
ACC
is a
quarterback.
long
He's a
time in
patient
the
guy.
pocket. Yeah.
Now, I don't think he'll have that much time against Virginia Tech, in my opinion.
And then one thing I wanted to mention, you just said Willis has forced 27 missed tackles on the year, 7 more than any ACC quarterback. He does have 5 fumbles on the year, also more than any ACC quarterback.
That's
So,
interesting.
Chris, I mean, you look at the numbers in Pro Football Focus. He does, and not to mention, again, 6th in the ACC in Pro Football Focus among quarterbacks. So, against weaker competition, but his numbers do rank somewhat middle of the pack in terms of ACC
they
quarterbacks.
do. You got to take it with a grain of salt, though, and that's why I didn't do too much with PFF in my preview this week. Is because
the level of competition.
The level of competition. Like, I looked at their PFF numbers and saw that almost everybody on the team graded out above 80, and I'm like, I can't use this week. Like, if Virginia Tech had played the same 6 teams, I'm pretty sure Virginia Tech would be 6-0, and everybody on the team would be graded out above 80 also.
So total defense is a crude metric. It's the classic NCAA, total defense ranking. And here's where Liberty's opponents, I'm excluding North Alabama because they're a FCS team, but here's where the FBS opponents rank in total defense. Western Kentucky's number 45. This is now out of 113 teams because the MAC played last night. So the MAC stats have been folded in, and now have 113 teams that have played. FIU number 87, Louisiana Monroe number 75, Syracuse number 93, and Southern Miss number 100. So these numbers have been run up against almost uniformly bad defenses. Western Kentucky is the only one that really has a pulse, as Chris likes to say.
Let's mention the running backs real quick, and I do want to mention, by the way, that Malik Willis is the team's leading rusher. 71 rushes, 495 yards, 7 yards per carry, and he has 6 touchdowns on the ground.
Yeah.
But their running backs, Chris, we have seen Virginia Tech's had to defend a couple of dynamic tandem running backs, 2 running backs, but Liberty, as you mentioned in your preview, they've got 3 running backs that it looks like that could carry the football in. Give me 1 second. Just had it up. So they have 3 running backs in Shedro Lewis, Joshua Mack, Peyton Pickett. They each have 300 yards on the ground individually this year, and then the number 6 rushing offense in the nation. So when you look at these backs, any comparisons? I know maybe not in terms of overall talent, but anyone they compare to maybe of North Carolina's backs?
Yeah, they don't really remind me of anybody physically. It's what stood out to me is how different all 3 backs are. One of them is 5'8", 220 pounds. He's kind of like
5'8", 220.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think in the highlight package from the Southern Miss game, they show him flat running over a defender.
So he's like
5'8", 220. Yeah.
He's like the same build as Khalil Herbert, right? And then they've got a guy who is 5'8", 175.
Javian Hawkins.
Except Hawkins is close to 200.
Hawkins is bigger. Yeah.
This is more like Deshaun McCleese, except he's faster than Deshaun McCleese, in my opinion. And then you've got a guy who's like 5'10", 200, and splits the difference, right?
Classic running back.
It's different styles. The small guy is Shedro Lewis. He's the big play threat. He's the one that he's got a 75-yard carry this year. He averages 8.3 yards per carry. He's kind of your boom or bust type running back, but he's the one that scares me the most, actually, because I actually don't think Liberty's going to win to put together like a 12 play 84-yard drive against Virginia Tech. I think it's going to take players like him and Willis breaking off some big chunk yardage.
You can argue they're a poor man's Louisville.
Yeah.
With some guys that can make explosive plays. I wouldn't put them on Louisville's level. I got to watch them play. Malik Cunningham and Javian Hawkins and Tutu Atwell are just phenomenally explosive players.
Yeah.
And I think that Liberty's got some guys who can do those sorts of things.
DJ Stubbs is Liberty's top receiver, and he has a Pro Football Focus grade that is second only to Ja'Cory Roberson among ACC players, and of course Virginia Tech. But if he was in the ACC, so again, that was a number that stood out to me. But Chris, he's 5'9", 185, lines up exclusively in the slot, and one of the numbers that I've found really interesting is that of his 32 targets on the season, 27 have been deemed catchable, and he's caught every one of them on the season. So when you look at the receiving core, is Stubbs really the one you got to key in on for Liberty?
Probably. They've got several that I noticed in their win over Southern Miss that were fairly impressive. But the thing is, they were all small. Their main ones. C.J. Yarborough here is listed as a starter, but he's not one of their top 3 leading receivers. Mm-hmm. He's all their top 3 leading receivers are all in the. Are all in the 5'8" to 5'9" range, and the 165 to 180 range. These guys are really, really small. Virginia Tech has done a really good job the last couple of weeks of limiting the opposing team's best receiver. I'm not saying Tutu Atwell didn't make any plays, but they did a great job keeping him in front of him and not generating.
Wasn't it like 7 catches, 40-some yards, 6 catches, 40-some yards?
And Ja'Cory Roberson was under 70 yards receiving against
Correct.
Roberson, I think, is the one I'm thinking about.
I forget what Atwell's stats were, but they've done a really good job against the smaller slot receiver type. I don't know what exactly positions Liberty's receivers play because they all have slot
They're
receivers.
All the same size, right?
Yeah, so the to me that's I think they have some speed at wide receiver, but at the same time, if Virginia Tech was able to hold down Tutu Atwell and the guy from Wake, Roberson, I don't fear their receivers very much, to be honest with you. Now, I'm sure they'll go out and have a big game now that I've said that, but I just don't see any evidence that they're going to provide a greater challenge with wide receiver talent than the Louisville guys did, right?
So where's the attention of your defense? Are they peeking into the backfield to see what Willis is doing, or are they paying attention to their jobs?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if they can just play disciplined. I mean, Willis is going to make some plays.
Yeah.
When you're facing as good an athlete as he is, that's just going to happen. But you can't get frustrated by it. You just got to maintain your discipline. Make him beat you on a consistent basis. Make him do it multiple times. And because I don't think the receivers are a huge threat to Tech's defensive backs.
Looks like Virginia Tech might have an opportunity to win the trenches with their defensive line against Liberty's offensive line. Chris, you highlighted it in your game preview. As you said, lacks size at a couple of spots on the interior, but they have experience from left tackle to right tackle, senior, redshirt senior, redshirt senior, redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior. Do you think there's an opportunity here for Tech's defensive line to have a good day against this Liberty offensive line?
I do. I think, as I said, Liberty's kind of caught in that mode between FCS and FBS as far as their talent level. They've certainly got some FBS talent at some spots, but they've also got FCS talent at other spots.
Yeah.
And, as a guy who has previewed every Virginia Tech football game for the last 15 years and looked at a roster card for every single one of those football games.
I've been making those roster cards up for a long time. Man. Close to 20 years, I guess.
Like the size of Damian Bounds at left guard, 6'1", 290. The size of Thomas Sargent at center, 6'1", 295. Yeah. These are redshirt seniors. Okay, they were recruited by Liberty to play FCS football. These are the size of offensive linemen when Virginia Tech plays William and Mary and Furman and teams like that. So, yes, I do think Virginia Tech has a big advantage.
So the guys I think about here are Norrell Pollard and Mario Kendricks and guys like that who have at times, not every game, but at times kind of taken their lumps against larger offensive lines that have just lined up and played smash mouth. And this is an opportunity for them to go up against somebody that doesn't have such a big size.
Oh, yeah, I think Pollard will smoke.
And Gerard Hewitt also. Yeah, Pollard. So if you're going to ask the question later, who needs to have a big day or who are you looking out to have
I was
a big day?
about to ask you guys this on Virginia Tech's defense. Who needs to have a good game to slow down Liberty's offense?
I don't know that needs to, but look for Pollard to have. Okay, he's been really active lately, and I think Pollard's a good football player. You know,
he is. He's a good natural football. I wish he was bigger, but like he's such a throwback, like just a good natural football player.
Plays hard.
He's a likable teammate too. Everybody likes him. I can't name one player.
How about a position group?
Oh, defensive end for sure. If they have to keep him in the pocket. They have to keep Malik Cunningham in the pocket. I thought Tech's defensive ends were fantastic last week against Louisville. And they did such a great job against the zone stretch along with the linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
And they did such a great job of keeping Malik Cunningham, the other Malik, in the pocket. Like, he got out of the pocket a few times, but not many. And the last time he did it, he got out because of Alan Tisdale lost leverage on the blitz, not because of the defensive line.
Right.
So I thought the defensive ends performed at a very high level last week. And actually, the PFF grades back that up, if I recall. So it's the same thing again. Louisville, honestly, is prep for Liberty. And Tech will face the same thing next week with Miami. So I'm actually glad to be playing these games back to back to back.
That's a solid point. They're going to run into
similar styles.
I'm blanking on the quarterback for De'Aaron King. Yeah.
Right. So the game plan is going to be different every week to a certain extent, but the general.
But what you're facing is very, very similar. That's an interesting point.
Yeah. So I think again, if you look up at the end of the day and see Willis doesn't have many rushing yards, or if most of his rushing yards came on the design run more so than scrambles,
right.
I think you're going to look back and say the defensive ends did a really good job of rushing upfield, keeping their leverage, and keeping him in the pocket. That's easier said than done because he's such a good athlete.
That sounds. Would you say that sounds like more of being in Amari Barno's wheelhouse? Not necessarily to power rush, but to get upfield and play contain. And then be
athletic enough to get off the block. Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I don't know Belmar's status. He only played, 3 snaps 2 weeks ago and didn't play at all last week?
Belmar and Wooten are iffy, I believe.
Right.
Is what I've been told. Wooten didn't travel last week.
No, he didn't travel.
Yeah.
So. It's good to have Garbutt back. Garbutt's generally been a disciplined player for Tech. Not quite as big as you would hope, but he can help. But I would Jalen Griffin has played well for Tech recently. He doesn't show up in the stat sheet from a sack, tackle for loss, and all that, but he played well last week. Like I said, I think all the defensive ends played pretty well last week.
Yeah.
So all those guys,
more of saying
for all of them.
Yeah.
Eric Fisher brings up in the comments section that essentially he would like to see Justice Reed play like the opening of the Louisville game this week.
And the NC State game.
Yeah.
And see, honestly, man, I think it's just his performance on a weekly basis, is going to come down to health. Like, we heard after the NC State game that he got banged up, during the NC State game. Yeah. For a few weeks there, he didn't look explosive at all.
He was invisible for a few weeks.
And then all of a sudden he looked explosive again.
So hopefully he's healthy.
Right. Hopefully he's healthy. But you got to remember, he's a 7th-year senior for a reason. Because he kept getting hurt. It was never realistic for him to play 11 healthy football games for Virginia Tech. He's a good player when he's healthy.
Yeah.
Like anybody else, he's going to struggle when he's hurt.
We just talked about Virginia Tech's defensive line a little bit. Liberty has an intriguing defensive line, including Rouse Russin, 6'6", 325-pound redshirt senior from Latvia. We'll talk about the Liberty defense when we come back from this break. You're listening and watching to episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, brought to you by the Fisher Law Firm. Welcome back into episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. For those that were watching, how about the elevator music making a comeback? A shout out to the best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart. A new look from we go to commercials, so a round of applause to him. So great to have you with us. Episode 148, Virginia Tech hosting Liberty this weekend. We just previewed the offense, and we transitioned to the defense. But a reminder that the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented each and every show by the Southeast Regional Training Center. It's a great way to get involved if you want to help Virginia Tech Wrestling. Go support Southeast Regional Training Center. And wrestling season, don't have the schedule out yet, but getting closer and closer.
I think didn't we go over that they're not going to start wrestling until January?
At the earliest, January 1.
Yeah, okay. It's real simple. If you want good wrestling, support the Southeast Regional Training Center, southeastrtc.com. There's a reason that Virginia Tech recruits so well in wrestling, and that's it.
Let's transition and talk about the Liberty Flames defense and a couple of stats to throw out. The Flames ranked number 10 nationally in total defense, limiting their opponents to 294 yards per game. However, as Chris detailed in his game preview, which is up on Tech Sideline right now, here's where their opponents rank in total offense. Western Kentucky is number 96. Florida International is number 97. Again, this is total offense. Louisiana Monroe.
Now, I believe Chris wrote this up yesterday before the MAC played last night.
Correct.
So,
right.
So it's even worse. There were like 103 teams ranked when you're giving these numbers. So sorry to interrupt. But,
so Western Kentucky 96, Florida International 97, Louisiana Monroe 92, Syracuse number 99 in total offense. Okay, this was yesterday out of 103. So Syracuse is 99 of 103 before, as Will said, the updates with the MAC. And then Southern Miss number 66. North Alabama not included because they're FCS. So, Chris, is this defense solid, or are their numbers inflated because of their opponents?
Let me throw a number in that he did not research, but what I put in my section of the game preview. Out of their 5 FBS opponents, and most of their FBS opponents have played 5-6 games. Only one of them's played only 3 games, I think. But 2 of their 5 FBS opponents have had their highest yards per play average of the season against Liberty. And a third had their second highest yards per play average. So that's kind of when you drill down into the stats, how are these teams that do whatever against Liberty, how are they doing against other teams? And in general, now the other 2 schools, not so great. But in general, there are teams that are playing Liberty and they're having their best yards per play offensive days against Liberty than they are against anybody else. So
I respect their stats. They're bigger at nose guard than your average FCS team would be. Or excuse me, lower level
FCS. I think you said it right.
No, I said FCS, and what I meant was transitioning from FCS to FBS. They're not an FCS team anymore, but they still have players who were recruited as FCS players.
Right.
But that said, man, Virginia Tech is the 16th in the country in offense. They are averaging 37 points a game, which is in the top 20, and that's against every single team Virginia Tech has faced has been an ACC foe.
Correct.
Right? ACC teams have not been able to stop Virginia Tech. The only ACC team that could stop Virginia Tech is Virginia Tech so far, right? And Liberty does not have ACC talent, not even close. So, no, I don't think they're going to be able to stop Virginia Tech on Saturday. Not at all.
Yeah, I would actually say we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about Liberty's defense, but you planned the show, so you go ahead.
Well, I wasn't planning on it. I really just want to mention one thing. I mentioned their number 10 nationally in total defense, but the stats on Tech's offense, right? Number 16 in total offense. Number 4 in rushing offense. Number 3 in yards per carry. And number 18 in scoring offense. All against Power 5 competition. All against ACC schools. And the best, and you mentioned this. I love this sentence, by the way. Southern Miss is the only offense Liberty has played with a pulse. And the Eagles scored 35 points on the Flames. So, again,
I mean,
trying to give numbers to give perspective, but it's so difficult when it's...
Yeah, again, like, I'm just saying what I think will happen, but I mean, you don't really know because when you play a terrible schedule, it hides your... It's difficult to tell your strengths and weaknesses when you play a schedule like that. Maybe their defense is better than I give it credit for, but I don't know because they haven't played anybody.
So here's the only thing we'll talk about Liberty's defense. Just quickly, because we got to talk about Ralph's Rusens for a moment, okay?
You say so.
So
Gesundheit.
one thing that stands out, as Chris noted in the game preview, is how big Liberty is on the interior at defensive tackle. Ralph's Rusens, 6'6", 325, redshirt senior. He's from, I want to say this correctly, Riga,
Latvia.
Riga, Latvia.
Yeah, and
he's backed up by fellow behemoth, as you say, Henry Chibuizi.
don't even ask. I don't know.
Chibuizi, 6'3", 350, redshirt sophomore.
Probably Chibuizi.
There we go.
Yeah,
That sounds better.
So Chris asked a trivia question while we were on break.
I did, and I'll be very impressed if anybody knows this answer. You can answer in the comments section, and Malcolm will let us know. But what former Virginia Tech athletic star was from Riga, Latvia, the same city as
star.
Rusens? Yeah,
So he actually kind of tipped his hand a little bit there.
yeah, Virginia Tech athletic star.
Yeah.
This was a major athlete for Virginia Tech back in the day. I say back in the day.
Whatever the day is.
Whatever the day is, but yeah, they're big on the inside, of course, but I just don't think this is a defense Tech is going to have much trouble with.
Could be a big day for Tech's running game, like last week against Louisville.
If you get too tall, Brock Hoffman will just hit you below the belt, man.
My bold prediction is that I almost called him Kerry Blackshear, but Raheem Blackshear will rush for over 100 yards this week.
There you go. Let's do this. Let's transition to special teams quickly, because you brought it up, and I think it is worth mentioning that Liberty's kicker, Alex Barbier, 7 of 11 on the year, but only 2 of 6 from beyond 30 yards.
30 yards. Not 30, 40 or 50,
right,
but
30.
beyond 30 yards, he's 2 of 6.
So as you said, and it's obvious, Tech has the advantage in special teams.
Give the kickoff stats.
Give the kickoff stats, yeah.
Liberty, let's see, where'd it go? In fact, only 8 of Barbier's 43 kickoffs have gone for a touchback.
That is unheard of.
That's unheard of. Well, in FBS these days, almost everybody can kick the ball in the end zone, right? And he can't. So it's hurt them. They've given up a kickoff return for a touchdown, so Virginia Tech might be able to do some damage there. When I say they have some FBS pieces on their team and some FCS pieces on their team, and they're just kind of this weird mix, he's one of the FCS pieces.
Yeah, that's even when Virginia Tech plays FCS teams, though.
Correct. There have been much better FCS kickers than this. Yeah.
That's nicely phrased. Yes.
Now, their punter, Aiden Alvis, 6 of his 18 punts have gone inside the opponent's 20. 6 have been fair caught. You mentioned how the Hokies are trying to get Tavion Robinson more involved in the punt return game. Is this the game you could see that happening?
It depends on how Liberty treats it. I mean, right now, Virginia Tech doesn't have a great chance to return punts because opponents are doing those angled kicks towards the sideline.
They won't kick it to the guy.
I mean, it means like when you catch it and you're 2 yards from the sideline, you've only got one direction to go, right? So your options are cut in half, and it's one of those where you're really good at something, so everybody changes the way they act against you. Like special teams changed because Frank Beamer's teams blocked so many kicks, and so that created the 3-man personal protection thing for punters, right? And guys like Tavion Robinson, he was so good last year returning punts that they're just like, let's just kick it towards the sideline and not give him as good a chance. And I'm not saying Virginia Tech can't do better there, but some of this is what the opponents are doing too and how they are taking it away. It's like if I could go back and change anything in the history of Virginia Tech football.
We were yelling about this in the office yesterday.
I would go back to the Sugar Bowl and be like, why in the world did we punt the ball to Peter Warwick in the middle of the field?
Frank, why are you kicking it anywhere where that guy can catch it?
Just kick it to the sideline. Anyway.
By the way, quick reminder, if you're watching live on YouTube, we're almost to the point where you get to ask Will and Chris questions, and we've got a decent amount of questions, but you have one, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We will get to them shortly. Okay, transition now to picks for the game. Before I ask for your score and who you think is going to win, Will, let me ask you this. I feel like in years past, and some people are alluding this in the comment section, Virginia Tech has at times struggled with FCS competition or teams that are not Power 5, sometimes gotten out to slow starts. Of course, that's highlighted by James Madison. Even last year, the Furman game was a 24-17 final score that came down to an onside kick.
Yeesh.
Does this Liberty team to you pose a threat to be to make this game close, competitive, and to the point where you're somewhat nervous, or do you feel confident in the Hokies that they'll get out to a quick start?
Well, so this is a drum I haven't really beat all that hard in past years, but watching how Virginia Tech came out less than fired up against Wake Forest, in my opinion, and watching how they came out fired up against Louisville, and the profound difference it made in the outcome of those two games, and these discussions we've had about how, you have the super talented teams like Clemson and Alabama, and you have teams that really don't have much talent, like Syracuse appears to be there, and there's one or two other like I think Georgia Tech's struggling with talent. They'll get there because they're recruiting fairly well. It just suddenly occurred to me, you just got to come out ready to play.
Well, Fuente said that on Tech Talk Live this week. He says he's like the uber talented. I think he might even use the phrase uber talented, which is the same one I did, or maybe he said super talented. But basically, so, the really talented teams, it doesn't matter because they'll still be able to out.
He did say that. That's right.
Like Clemson did Boston College. Like Clemson played just as bad, if not worse, against against Boston College as Virginia Tech did against Wake Forest.
But they're so good.
But they have so much talent that it just didn't matter in the end.
And BC also spit the bit there at the end. Jurkovic quit making plays that he'd making all year, really. But so it's really simple. Just come out ready to play. And again, all I've done is watch Liberty versus Southern Miss, some 10 minutes worth of highlights from that game. That's all it would take to motivate me, watching Malik Willis run around and make throws. I'd be like, okay, they got some guys that can play. We need to be ready.
I'd be worried maybe to a certain extent in some other circumstances, but there's two things that make me not worried. The Wake Forest game happened 2 weeks ago.
It's still fairly recent.
It's still fresh in everybody's memory.
Yeah.
Like as bad as they played against Duke last year, they didn't have a Duke again the rest of the year, right?
Right.
Not once. Good job. And second of all, I mean, Liberty's got that 25 next to their name, right? Yeah. And we'll find out on Saturday whether they deserve it or not. But if you're a Virginia Tech football player, it's like, okay, we just had a horrible effort and lost to Wake Forest 2 weeks ago, and now a team from an hour away that's not even in the ACC is coming to our house. They're ranked.
They're ranked and we're not.
Right. We need to stomp them into the ground and show no mercy. And that's the attitude I want to see. And if Virginia Tech comes out with that attitude, I don't think they're going to have any trouble winning the game at all.
I agree.
Chris, who wins and what's the final score?
I've got it 44-24 Virginia Tech. I really think Malik Willis is a top-notch athlete, and he's going to make some plays, and he would make plays against pretty much anybody. But I don't think he's going to have the supporting cast, and I don't think Liberty's going to have the defensive talent to stop the Tech offense.
I went more conservative. I went with 41-30 Virginia Tech. And so we've had the game preview up since this morning. We've got 472 votes in, asking the fans what they think. And 3/4 of the responses say Tech will win by 11 plus points.
And how many people think Liberty are going to win, period?
6 votes out of 410 votes out of 472.
So 10 Liberty fans.
10 Liberty fans stopped by. And yeah, that's because when I tweeted out the game preview, I tagged Sea of Red. SeaofRed.com is a Liberty sports website, independent. I tagged them, and that may have made a few Liberty fans wander over.
I wish you had done that because they're going to read it, and now they're going to come after me on Twitter. Because
I don't think so.
Because I dare disrespect their team.
I've actually exchanged emails with those guys in the past, not recently, but
I didn't mean they were going to do it. I meant they're going to retweet the preview, and then I'm just going to have a random Liberty.
Oh, that's a good question. I need to go check and see if they're reaching. I don't know. Your preview is respectful. I mean,
from our perspective, it's respectful.
I don't know how their fan base.
Yeah, I don't know.
It is not. If I was a Liberty fan coming in with a chip on my shoulder, I would be looking for disrespect, and I don't think it's in there.
I saw a former Virginia Tech football player at the gym yesterday, and he said he works with several Liberty grads.
Okay.
They're all talking smack, and they're all like, they're all like, we're going to win this weekend. We're a top 25 team, right? And I said, go in there tomorrow and tell them that the teams they've beaten are a combined 4-28, and they're not going to have any idea of that stat.
Not to mention, it's amazing too, and I think we could honestly bring this topic up for another podcast. Just how much, so the AP poll, right, and the teams that they put in there and the voters that are doing that. But at the same time, Vegas has it at a 14.5 point spread. The Hokies are favored. I guess that's how 25 teams. So, anyways, we have a lot of questions on YouTube. We also have questions on Twitter. So let's go ahead and dive right into them. And some of them are comments as well. So
first of all, anybody watching the video live, Malcolm, you can do the floating head thing, even though you're not going to handle the questions this week.
Get up here, Malcolm. Come on. I take this honor. I take this with a lot of pride here, asking the questions this week.
So let me jump in and say that we've already started. I told everybody last week that we've rented the office next door. Chris and I are going to move out into there probably within the next 2 weeks. We got to get the furniture and computers, everything ordered and set up. And we're taking steps to improve the podcast operation, how it looks and functions. And one of the things we're looking to do is have another person who looks at social media during the podcast. Now you're handling it today, and I'm sure you're going to do a fine job. But we're looking to have a fifth person, really, who will go through social media and kind of get the questions lined up. And we may actually switch to a model where we ask questions throughout the podcast, since we will have that person dedicated to that. And that'll free Malcolm up to just handle strictly podcast production, as opposed to having to also do that sort of thing. So that's why Evan's asking the questions today.
He's still the best producer in the land, whether he's asking questions or not, though. So, okay, couple of comments here. First of all, Mr. 804 comments and says, Mike Emo, the question about Latvia, I believe.
Mike Emo was not.
Mike Emo?
Mike Emo was from Northern Virginia.
That's right.
Like Riga, Latvia, the Eastern European country.
He went to Robinson High School.
Right,
I actually know that.
I could be misinterpreting. He's Eric Fisher says Muzak with a question mark.
Nope.
Okay. Who is the? What's the answer to the lot?
Muzak.
Oh, Muzak. I was about to say I didn't know who that was. Okay, there were a lot of comments about the music in there, by the way.
That's funny.
A lot of people were enjoying the music in between the commercial breaks.
We need to go back to the best producer in the land doing this stuff, man.
Well,
Herbert and King should be licking their chops to run back some kickoffs with 5 exclamation points from Justin Thomas. Travis Poff says, I wouldn't overlook Liberty at all. It seems like a trend of getting upset by teams like this. VT needs to play every game teams like they were playing Clemson or Alabama.
And that's not going to happen because that's not human nature at all. Because,
here's a question. Happen. Ronnie Adams asked, were you surprised to see Garbutt last week?
Yes.
I was surprised.
I was surprised, but then when I found out before the game that Belmar wasn't there and Wooten wasn't there, and then I saw Garbutt on the field, I was like, oh, well, that makes sense now.
Did you look up how many snaps he played?
I want to say like 9 to 12.
I was going to guess 12.
Yeah.
But
he did okay. He actually he got the outside pressure that got Fuga that sack.
Yeah, that's
down
right.
on the goal line, and then like the next play they ran at 90 yards.
But yes, we were surprised.
Another question, and this was news that came out last night, that Virginia and Louisville will not play their game this week due to COVID cases in the Louisville program.
Ronnie, it's Louisville's fault.
Ronnie Adams asks, do y'all think we might have another COVID surge after playing Louisville last weekend?
No, I think most of the Tech players, quite frankly, have already tested positive, and now they're not going to have to test again for months. So, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I did hear, and I posted this on the board last Saturday afternoon, I heard that Louisville, before it got announced, I heard that Louisville was going to be missing a lot of defensive linemen, and they were very, very close to canceling the Virginia Tech game last week. And I think the only reason they didn't is because Tech was already there.
That's a good point.
I think all those tests. I bet all those guys they had tested positive, and they didn't get the test results back until late Friday night / early Saturday morning. Just like when Tech found out they weren't going to have Justin Hamilton that time. Yeah. I think the only reason they didn't cancel it is because Tech had already traveled.
And I believe I saw, probably rolling through Twitter, somebody said, I think Satterfield said that they only have 3 defensive linemen right now who can play. So you don't play with just 3 defensive linemen.
I mean, if they should have canceled the Tech game. If they were cutthroat, as I always thought Louisville was, they would have canceled it.
I know, but they didn't.
We should have canceled the UNC game. I'll say it.
All right. Postpone it would have been great.
All right, a couple other questions here, both on Twitter and from YouTube. Hokey28 has been dying to get this question in, and Hokey28, I apologize we have not done it on Sooner Podcast, but we're getting it in today. In the future, why doesn't Virginia Tech schedule West Virginia and Tennessee every year as part of the non-conference games?
Both of them?
This would spark national interest and be good for all parties involved, one would think. in the future, annually scheduled Tennessee and West Virginia would be huge for Tech and other programs.
Well, first of all, Tennessee's not going to do it.
Right.
So that's not a Virginia Tech thing. That's a Tennessee thing. I'm not sure about the West Virginia thing. That may be a Virginia Tech thing.
It's definitely like Virginia Tech fans don't want to play West Virginia, but they want to play Tennessee. West Virginia fans want to play Virginia Tech. Tennessee fans don't want to play Virginia Tech.
Right.
So,
well, my buddy Richie Davis wants to see WVU and Tech every year.
I want to see WVU and Tech every
Richie
year.
played small college football, and he loves nasty rivalries.
I mean, what good is college football without the emotion? Without emotion?
I know. Well, just go back to that FedEx Field game. That was awesome.
That was great. It was fantastic. So
are we even answering the question?
I would. Okay,
So it sounds like Tennessee doesn't want to schedule Virginia Tech.
That's
those Tennessee already plays 8 SEC games, and I don't think they feel like playing a home and home. Playing Virginia Tech every year. That's not going to improve their recruiting. They're probably going to lose 50% of them. They have a 100,000
seat stadium.
Right. They can make more money if they get that extra home game every year. Like, it doesn't do them any good to play at Virginia Tech.
That's their viewpoint.
Right. West Virginia, though, I am totally in favor of playing every year, and I'm glad they're playing a home and home soon.
Well, they ought to play that game in Charlotte.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
So, you know what's amazing about that too? As much time passes, so for like my age and kids that are in college and Malcolm's age, I don't really consider West Virginia a rival because my whole life I've grown up.
Oh, it was nasty.
But I understand learning back about. How Morgantown. I get it now, and believe me, I totally understand. But it's funny. It's so much time has passed. It's almost like the current kids now don't realize the Black Diamond Trophy, how big of a deal it is.
Tech fans they don't like the nastiness of some West Virginia fans, so they want to disengage from the rivalry.
Well, then just don't go to Morgantown.
Well, just don't go. I realize that you don't get along with some of their fans, but it's just like we as a group, as a fan base, have so far to go before we're a big time program fan base. Auburn and Alabama, they go to each other's campus and cut down each other's historical trees, right? And we're just like, let's not play West Virginia. They're a little too nasty.
They cursed at me.
Right. So we can't have that attitude if we want to be a big time program. We can't be afraid of things like that. And I think emotions. I'm not glad UVA beat Virginia Tech last year, but all those years where they had no chance to beat Virginia Tech, and you couldn't even really hate them that bad because you knew they had no chance. And, now there's some juice back into it because they beat Tech last year, right? And I remember we played, to end the 96 season, we played West Virginia and UVA in back-to-back games.
Back-to-back weeks, I know.
And to me, that's my favorite era of Virginia Tech football.
Yeah.
And this stuff these days, when UVA is down and just at the bottom of the trash heap in football, as they were for so long, and then we weren't playing West Virginia at all. Where's the emotions? That's what college football is supposed to be about. So and Chris and I have talked about this and written about this before. That was a big loss after entering the ACC.
UVA in a few years became uncompetitive with Tech, and Tech quit playing West Virginia. And that's two big rivalry games that either disappeared or were diminished.
And I'll say this, when I was in school, I remember my first experience around West Virginia fans was in 2002 when some came to Lane Stadium. And I remember a big group of 30 or 40 were walking down Spring Road, which is now Beamer Way. And they were rough, and I was walking in the opposite direction, and I was scared of them. But I still want to play the game.
Yeah.
I still want to play the game.
So, Evan, one last thing on that. The interesting thing is, as nasty as that rivalry was, it peaked under two gentlemen coaches, Frank Beamer and Don Nehlen. Both very, very classy guys that got along great, but the fans and the players, that's where the nastiness of it
Let me say this about West Virginia fans. I was in Charlotte for the Belk Bowl, and I was at Whiskey River the night before the game. And all of a sudden, I was going to watch the West Virginia-Miami Bowl game. And all of a sudden, I noticed there's one guy in a West Virginia jersey in the bar. And then all of a sudden, the West Virginia fight song comes on. And I look around me, and I'm surrounded by West Virginia fans. It turns out Whiskey River is the West Virginia bar in Charlotte. And I'm stuck here, surrounded by West Virginia fans with my Tech gear on and everything like that, because I'm going to the bowl game the next day. And they were great. They were just like Tech fans. They were normal people. I think there's a big difference between like a regular West Virginia grad that goes off and lives in a city and works a regular job than like somebody who like has lived and stayed in the state of West Virginia their entire life and maybe didn't even go to the school.
Go to Morgantown.
Just don't go.
Yeah, there were all these stories coming out of FedEx Field in 2017 that the worst fans there were actually the Virginia Tech fans.
I had a great time in FedEx Field. I thought it was great.
Except for the parking and getting into
the stadium was too long.
All right, so a couple comments actually about this, and then we've got a couple questions. If you ask them, we'll try to get to them on next show. But let's go ahead and wrap up with this theme here. Clark Rulin chimes in. Wouldn't you think Georgia Tech seemed to take West Virginia's place?
No, because Georgia Tech they don't have hardcore fans. Like fans make college football, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like I agree that the Paul Johnson thing, like Virginia Tech fans and Paul Johnson, and
I liked what he added to the rivalry.
I liked what he added to the
Paul.
rivalry, but in the end, like. They just don't have a big fan base, and they just don't care.
Yeah. They don't even get that into it with Georgia.
I mean, I know someone who went to Georgia, and she told me that Georgia grads, their nickname for Georgia Tech grads are the dorks. They're just don't care about football all that much.
Yeah.
So
no, Clark.
No, Clark.
A couple other comments. Justin Thomas says, I remember fans traveling to West Virginia for a game after Tech played a 1AA school, and West Virginia fans were throwing AA batteries at our fans.
Yep.
Eric Fisher, I went to Morgan Hole, as he calls it, in 97 and 99, never again.
Okay. Well, I went to the Pitt game in 2003, and I was on the field for it. And I watched that. I had beer cans thrown. That was a night game. It was at noon. I had beer bottles thrown at my car while cops just laughed.
This is Pittsburgh, not West Virginia.
I watched. Our cheerleaders were on the field warming up, and they laid down the Virginia Tech flag. And I watched a Pitt student come down to the front row, unzip his pants, and pee on the Virginia Tech flag.
Really?
Cops did nothing. I watched our players walk back to the locker room after the game, and all the Pitt students were above them, throwing batteries, full drink bottles, everything at them. It was horrible. But, like, Pitt's in the ACC, right?
You know what? Malcolm does have something to do at 3:30.
He does.
This is fun.
No, I'm sitting here looking at the clock saying, God, this is great content.
I could go on and on and on, yes.
I think the bottom line is we should do a podcast on this rivalry sometime.
It's like a Red Sox fan saying we shouldn't play the Yankees anymore because the Bronx can be rough.
Next spring, let's do some of this kind of stuff.
Listen, yes, absolutely. After basketball season, we've got a couple months. We'll weave that in. So, all right. That'll wrap things up. Episode 148 of Tech Sideline Podcast. Chris, what's coming up on the website the rest of the week, and what can our subscribers expect?
Oh, same as always, man. We'll have a Friday Q&A tomorrow. Corey's got another article coming this week. We should have one more Jason Stame article.
Corey just texted that he sent a Cornelson article.
He sent a Cornelson article, which will be in place of his Run It Back article because we're playing Liberty this week and we've only played Liberty once ever, so we can't. Right. There's no really big stories there. So the Cornelson article will replace Run It Back and be run tomorrow morning.
Okay, fantastic. Will, any closing thoughts?
No, I just hope these aren't famous last words, but I feel good about Saturday. I think if Virginia Tech comes out and plays hard, they'll take care of business.
I might go out in my yard and have my own personal tailgate. It's going to be nice weather.
Man, if I wasn't working the game in the press box, I would come to you.
Oh, why would you do that?
I'd go over to Malcolm's. sit out in his yard.
Absolutely. All right, that'll do it for us. Episode 148 Tech Sideline Podcast for our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, your podcast host, Evan Hughes, saying so long. Thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 148 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, presented by the Fisher Law Firm. Have a great weekend and enjoy the game. We'll talk to you Monday morning right here on the Tech Sideline Podcast.